the emergency alarm echoed through the underground subway station just as every train stopped moving. Hundreds of passengers looked around in confusion until a terrified woman suddenly screamed that her 10-year-old son had disappeared. Within seconds, panic spread across the crowded platform like wildfire. Marcus Reed quietly placed his maintenance toolbox beside an electrical cabinet and immediately ran toward the frightened mother. He repaired subway tunnels every night and knew every hidden corridor beneath the station. A missing child underground could become dangerous within minutes. The mother struggled to breathe while describing her son to transit police. Tears streamed down her face as she repeated his name again and again. She kept saying she only looked away for a single moment before he completely disappeared. Transit officers immediately closed every station exit, while loudspeaker announcements instructed passengers to remain where they were. Security teams split across platforms, ticket halls, stairways, and waiting areas. Every passing minute increased the fear that something terrible had happened underground. Marcus calmly asked the mother where she last saw her son. She pointed toward a colorful train display near Platform 4, where children often stopped to watch arriving trains. Marcus quietly nodded because he immediately remembered repairing equipment beside that exact location. Before Marcus could continue speaking, a businessman wearing a gray suit suddenly pointed directly toward him. His loud voice cut through the frightened crowd. "I saw that black maintenance worker talking to the little boy only a few minutes ago." The station instantly became silent. Passengers slowly turned toward Marcus while several people stepped backward without realizing it. Two transit officers immediately changed direction and walked toward Marcus instead of continuing their search through the nearby platforms. Marcus remained calm, despite every eye watching him. The boy asked which train went to the airport. I pointed toward the information board and returned to repairing the signal cabinet. His voice never changed because he refused to let panic control him. The businessman folded his arms confidently before speaking again. "That conversation looked strange to me." Marcus looked directly into his eyes and quietly replied, "What exactly looked strange?" The man opened his mouth but couldn't answer because he honestly didn't know. The lead transit officer asked Marcus to remain beside the platform wall while security continued searching the station. Marcus glanced toward the service tunnel entrance and immediately noticed something that made his expression suddenly change with concern. Earlier that afternoon, Marcus repaired an emergency service door beside Platform 4. The electronic lock malfunctioned twice before finally closing. Management postponed replacing the damaged control panel because shutting down the station during rush hour would inconvenience thousands of commuters. Marcus immediately pointed toward the maintenance tunnel. "Search behind that service door." The officer frowned and asked why. Marcus answered without hesitation, "Because if the lock failed again, someone could be trapped behind it without anyone hearing them." The officer hesitated for only a second before looking back toward the businessman. That single moment frustrated Marcus because another precious second disappeared while the missing child remained somewhere inside the massive underground station waiting for someone to find him. Marcus picked up his emergency access keys from his toolbox and started running toward the service corridor. Two transit officers quickly followed while the frightened mother hurried behind them, desperately hoping Marcus was right about the hidden maintenance passage beneath the station. The service corridor stretched deep beneath the platforms where passengers never entered. Concrete walls echoed with distant train vibrations while emergency lights blinked softly overhead. Thick electrical cables lined both sides of the narrow hallway leading toward the locked maintenance section. Marcus stopped beside the heavy steel service door and carefully listened without speaking. For several long seconds he heard nothing except humming electrical equipment. Then, barely louder than a whisper, a frightened child quietly called for help from somewhere behind the wall. Marcus immediately unlocked the emergency panel and manually disconnected the damaged electronic lock. The heavy door slowly opened while rusty hinges groaned loudly through the silent corridor. Behind stacked maintenance supplies sat a terrified little boy hugging his backpack tightly. The boy looked up with tears filling his eyes before recognizing Marcus. Relief immediately replaced fear across his face. "You came back," he whispered softly. Marcus smiled warmly and answered, "I promised someone would always come looking for you." Marcus gently lifted the frightened child into his arms before carrying him back toward the platform. The little boy held tightly onto Marcus's shoulder the entire walk because he was still shaking after spending almost 20 minutes trapped alone inside the dark maintenance area. The child's mother saw them before anyone else. She ran across the platform without stopping until she reached her son. Dropping onto her knees, she hugged him tightly while crying uncontrollably. Every passenger watching quietly exhaled with relief as the reunion unfolded. The little boy suddenly turned toward Marcus while still holding his mother's hand. "He found me," he said proudly. The crowded platform became completely silent because everyone immediately remembered who they had quietly suspected only minutes before. The mother slowly looked toward Marcus with tears still covering her face. Her expression changed from fear to overwhelming regret. She realized the same man people questioned was actually the reason her son safely stood beside her instead of remaining trapped underground. Transit officers immediately reviewed security cameras inside the station control room. The footage clearly showed Marcus answering the child's question before walking away. Another camera captured the little boy curiously pushing open the faulty maintenance door moments before it automatically locked behind him. The businessman who accused Marcus quietly lowered his head while avoiding every person's eyes around him. The lead transit officer slowly removed his cap before walking toward Marcus. He paused briefly, knowing simple words could never completely repair what already happened. The lead transit officer slowly removed his cap before walking toward Marcus. He paused for several uncomfortable seconds before quietly saying, "Mr. Reed, I owe you an apology." Every passenger nearby remained silent because they knew exactly why those words mattered. Marcus looked calmly at the officer before answering, "You don't owe me an apology first." The officer looked confused. Marcus pointed toward the frightened little boy. "You owe him an explanation for why everyone stopped searching when someone pointed at me." The officer lowered his eyes without arguing. He knew Marcus was right. Precious minutes had disappeared while officers questioned the wrong person. During that time, the frightened child remained trapped behind one damaged maintenance door only a short distance away. The businessman slowly stepped forward through the crowd. His confident voice from earlier had completely disappeared. Looking directly at Marcus, he quietly admitted, "I thought I was helping." Marcus answered gently, "You were helping fear, not the search." The businessman struggled to hold Marcus's gaze. "I honestly believed something looked suspicious." Marcus nodded slowly before replying, "Sometimes people confuse suspicion with evidence. They aren't the same thing, especially when someone's life may depend on the difference." The little boy quietly walked toward Marcus while still holding his mother's hand. Looking up with innocent curiosity, he softly asked, "Why did they think you were bad?" Every adult standing nearby immediately became silent after hearing this simple question. Marcus knelt beside the child before answering carefully. Sometimes grown-ups become frightened and allow their imagination to speak before the facts do. The boy frowned thoughtfully before replying, "That sounds like a bad way to solve problems." Marcus smiled warmly. "You're right, it usually is." Several officers exchanged uncomfortable glances because the child's simple observation explained the entire situation better than any speech could. Truth often sounded clearer when spoken through innocent eyes instead of frightened adults. The child's mother slowly approached Marcus once more. Tears filled her eyes again as she quietly admitted, "When someone pointed at you, I stopped believing what I actually knew." Marcus listened patiently without interrupting while she searched for the right words. She continued speaking through tears. "You were the only person asking useful questions, but I forgot that because fear became louder." Marcus gently nodded before replying, "Fear always tries to become the loudest voice inside every emergency." Transit engineers soon arrived beside the damaged maintenance door carrying replacement equipment. After inspecting the broken electronic lock, they immediately confirmed Marcus's earlier maintenance report accurately predicted the exact failure that trapped the missing child behind the heavy steel entrance. The station manager quickly accessed Marcus's original repair request through the maintenance computer. Everyone watched quietly, while the report clearly displayed the warning submitted that morning. Beside the warning appeared one disappointing response: "Repair delayed until next maintenance window." The manager slowly closed the computer screen before looking toward Marcus. "If we repaired that lock today instead of tomorrow, none of the..." News reporters soon gathered outside the station after hearing about the temporary lockdown. Television cameras waited near the main entrance while commuters watched from behind police barriers. The station manager asked Marcus whether he would answer a few questions publicly. Marcus hesitated because attention never interested him. Finally he agreed, hoping people might remember the lesson instead of simply remembering his face. He quietly walked outside while dozens of cameras immediately turned toward him beneath the bright station entrance lights. One reporter asked the first question, "People are calling you a hero tonight. How does that feel?" Marcus smiled politely before answering, "I'm grateful the little boy is safe. That's the only part of today that really matters to me." Another reporter asked, "What was the hardest part of today's experience?" Marcus remained silent briefly before answering honestly, "Watching people spend valuable time deciding whether to trust me instead of spending that same time searching for a frightened child." The crowd listening outside became completely silent. No dramatic speech followed. Marcus simply looked toward the station entrance before quietly adding, "Fear delayed the rescue. Kindness finished it. I hope people remember which one actually saved the child." The following morning Marcus returned to the station before sunrise, carrying the same maintenance toolbox he used every day. Trains quietly rolled through empty platforms while early commuters hurried toward work. Everything looked normal again, Yet something inside the station had changed forever. As Marcus reached his workshop, he noticed a small envelope resting on top of his toolbox. Written across the front in colorful crayon appeared only one word: Marcus. He carefully opened the envelope before beginning another ordinary workday beneath the city streets. Inside rested a child's drawing, showing Marcus holding the little boy's hand beside a subway train. Across the top, uneven handwriting proudly declared, "The man who never stopped looking." Marcus smiled quietly before folding the picture with great care. Later that afternoon, the little boy returned with his mother carrying a tiny toy subway train from the station gift shop. He proudly placed it into Marcus's hands before smiling brightly. "Heroes should always have their own train," he said with complete sincerity. Marcus laughed softly before accepting the small gift. "I'll keep it forever." The little boy hugged Marcus tightly while nearby passengers smiled warmly. Nobody whispered anymore. Nobody stepped backward. Nobody searched for reasons to be afraid of the man standing before them. As Marcus watched another train disappear into the tunnel, he quietly placed the toy subway train beside the child's drawing inside his toolbox. They weren't expensive gifts, but they carried something far more valuable than money could ever buy. Long after passengers forgot the delayed trains, the station announcements, and the temporary lockdown, one little boy would always remember the maintenance worker who refused to stop searching. He wouldn't remember the accusations. He wouldn't remember the fear. He would remember kindness. And every time another train arrived safely at platform 4, Marcus would quietly remember one simple truth that never changed. Fear found someone to blame in seconds. Truth needed time to arrive. But kindness never stopped searching until everyone finally came home.